Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where we always stress that options give you the flexibility and define your risk on entry. Well, no better example than Nvidia, and we're going to break it down for you right here on the Rebel's Edge. Bang!
All right.
Bang.
From Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, where we're all crossing our fingers, toes, everything, that the storm that is likely to be called Ernesto, that is because once it hits a certain level, Pete, they actually give them names, as you know, from 5 times before.
Oh, no. Brutal.
But this one, it could be a major hurricane, but if it is, it's going to be way past us. Now, it's going to come right by the island of Puerto Rico on the northeast side. The eye of the storm should be passing on the northeast side tomorrow at like 4 in the morning, should start hitting. They say it's a really fast moving storm, like 28 miles an hour. A lot more damage is done when they come in slow and they just sit there.
Yeah.
You know, 20 miles an hour, 18 miles an hour. 28's like a sprinter. So again, crossing our fingers, and of course, prayers up for all the people that are in the path of this, because it could be pretty nasty. We'll probably get some pretty good rain, Pete, maybe even some flash flooding. But if it stays out to the northeast of us, you know, again, fingers crossed. Yeah. All right, let's dive into the Rebel's Edge, where each day Pete and I bring you macro minute fantastic futures, 4 stocks that we're trading and whether we would continue to trade them or just avoid them, and some sports. So let's dive into macro, Pete.
Right.
I'm going to go with Europe's largest economy, that's Germany, showing that investor confidence plummeted in Germany, according to their ZEW survey, the largest decline in 2 years, Pete, highlighting ongoing concerns. So since that's the largest economy in Europe, Pete, I'm going to say that's about as macro as I'm going to get today.
Well, and the other side of the macro is some of the various numbers that we've actually already collected. Some wholesale inflation's one of them. We've got CPI in front of us. We got jobless claims on Thursday. We've got Friday, we got housing starts. So we really have a pretty packed week of data that's going to be something that's going to really matter, I think, for the Fed. So I think it's always important just to kind of keep an eye on what these things are doing, and obviously the direction that they're going to push around this market. We've already seen it to some degree, and I think it's going to be even more impactful as we get through this week.
Very likely, Pete. Let's also cover fantastic futures, where I know that you've been accurately calling volatility and what people should at least consider, if not do. And I'm going to say another one that you've covered a lot is coffee. And coffee is up 30% year to date, and it's down 3% today. So I'd say pay attention to both those two factors, up 30%, down 3% today. And we've got stories all about coffee coming up with Starbucks, Pete.
All right, so here's what I'm thinking really does stand out for me from the fantastic future side of things. The 10-year at a 385, that's pretty interesting. That move has been really, really rapid for the people who don't understand. It's a big move that it's made. Gold, explosive to the upside at 2,500 plus. That's been incredible. It seems like a new high almost every day. But I look at the VIX, John, down 6%, down into the 19s. Now, there was the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, and then we got into the 20s. Now we're under 20. We're sitting here now today trading about 1930, 1940, somewhere in there. It just goes to show you, John, exactly what you and I talk about all the time. That volatility, when it comes in and it gets that high, it's pretty tough to sustain that, and it hasn't sustained that at all. This was 1 week ago. 1 week ago. So let's not forget about that. I mean, this is an amazing move. We were at 65 in that pre-market, and it's just gone bing, 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 almost back right into that range that we were before, John. And yes, could it pop up again into the 20s? Sure, it could. but it makes it a lot more difficult, I think, for all of us to try to interpret things when it's between 20 and 30. It gets under 20, a little bit easier. 20 to 30, tough. 30 plus, that's another one that I think we can trade.
You bet. And it's all about trading, folks. And how about this one? It turns out, Pete, last week, institutional investors were buying that dip. And sadly, retail investors were selling into that dip. So Nvidia is the stock I'm going to highlight, Pete, because they were named the top rebound stock in the S&P 500. Wall Street basically saying the slump was overdone. Nvidia is now up, get this, Pete, 24% since last Monday's low. An amazing move. We traded down to 92. Technically, we traded to 90, but we opened at 92, and there wasn't much trade down to 90. But nonetheless, that is an amazing move to come off the bottom that quickly, Pete. And for folks that were in stock when it fell all the way down to 90, I don't know if too many of you were holding on at that point. On the other hand, if you had options, you would have options to hold on longer. And so look at that low right there on the screen, $90 and some change, and a $500 million share turnover, Pete. That's massive turnover in Nvidia. What did you think here?
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point. And Bank of America got out there and said, hey, look, if you're looking for something, this is the name after everything got beat up the way that it did. It does make a lot of sense. They do have some competition out there, John, and part of it has to do with the fact that some of the restrictions that the Biden administration has gone to in terms of Nvidia, and that's not a negative. It's just there is restrictions out there on what they can do. They're concerned about what might be used for the military, all the AI chips and everything else. Makes some sense. So I think that, but that doesn't mean that others can't get in there. And it seems like there might be a little competition trying to get jumping in there right now in the AI chip space. That's something I think to keep an eye on. I'll tell you, the fact that, like you said, August 5th, it's trading $90 in the pre-market. 90.69 was the number. And today we've gotten over 115. It gives you a little bit of an idea that once all the dogs got done, there was a bunch of folks out there feasting on this thing, and it's been moving to the upside. We've seen a lot of folks do really, really well with the unusual option activity in this one as well, John. It's been crazy, and it's been a moving stock that's been absolutely almost unstoppable from last week.
Well, and folks, if you wanted to trade it, maybe you need this book.
Wait a minute.
What book? Yeah, this book.
That book.
It's not an option. Both books are good. In fact, all four of our books, folks, are good. We're going to be coming out with a box set soon, but it's not an option. If you were in stock and it fell from, basically the high was 141, Pete, and for it to go from 141 to 90, that's pretty ugly. If you were in an option trade, you were probably risking a couple dollars. And when you lost half of those couple dollars, you should cut that loss. If you were doing the same thing with stock and watching the stock plummet down, and keep in mind, it opened at 92 last Monday, opened there. So you couldn't have sold it higher unless you had pre-market access. And in most cases, you wouldn't have got much over 95 because we were opening down 1,000 points. That's when these things could have saved you. Options. So go claim your book. It's not an option.com. That's it's not an option.com. All right, Pete, let's dive into the next one, which is, like I say, related to your calls, accurate as they've been in coffee futures, Starbucks. But this has nothing to do with their earnings, Pete. Everything to do with leadership, because they picked a new leader, a CEO who's going to start September 9th. He just happens to be the CEO from Chipotle, CMG. And that's why Starbucks is up 20% today, Pete. It ain't the 3% drop in coffee prices. It's that Brian Niccol is perceived as a guy that could actually turn this thing around.
Well, and not only is Starbucks up, call it 21%, wherever it is right now. It's been moving around. It's had a huge move today. You also look over at Chipotle. That's down 16%. So they're getting hit pretty hard because this is a guy who came in at a very difficult time for Chipotle. They had all kinds of health issues and this, that, and the other. He came in, he fixed it. He came from Taco Bell, and he absolutely crushed it for them, John. I think that the early tea leaves are saying he's going to crush it as well for Starbucks. The only issue that I've got right now, though, John, is in the economy that we've got, are people willing to still spend that $5.50 for that cup of coffee, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're going here. And I think that's what, we're seeing. And they're going to have to come up with some very interesting things. Not that he can't do it. I think that he can. But this is a much different situation than he took before. This one's more about how do they become more profitable. The other one was we've got to clean this thing up, and then we're going to worry about the profitability, which did come. And they absolutely have crushed it the entire way through. And you look at CMG, it's been an absolute just bottom left to the upper right, Dennis Gartman all the way kind of a stock. But Starbucks, they have struggled for a long time, John. They have been struggling for over a year or more at least in terms of what they've been able to do and watching that stock and the easing back. It's just been absolutely crazy. I will say this, it's trading at about a 20 PE, which is fairly inexpensive. So from that perspective, they are doing some things right, but they've got to get those sales up again. And they have not been able to do that because China's in a bit of a tough time right now, as well as the US, and that's what's hurting them.
Yeah. Your question, Pete, that I think is very valid is, are consumers going to continue to spend $4, $5, $6 for a cup of coffee when they can go somewhere else? They go to McDonald's and pick the same thing up for less than half the price and maybe not wait in as long a line. But, that little green mermaid on the cup, that's why a lot of people do it. It's a status symbol, Pete.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about Tencent Music, TME. These guys reported second quarter revenue decline just under 2%, Pete. So they did, like $985 million, but that was still short of expectations, and a significant decrease in revenue from social entertainment services. Massive one there, Pete, almost 43%. So when you see something like that going on with TME, you know why this stock, look at that on the chart, is falling off of a cliff. That's just something that you can't avoid a bad day in the market, maybe a bad several days. And I guess that's my question to you, Pete. Do you think, that this China-based company can actually make a significant rebound, or is it a don't touch for a little bit?
I think they're finding themselves in a really difficult spot, John, because when you look at even just the monthly active users, just that, not focusing on social entertainment, but just looking at MAUs, that was down almost 4%. So that's definitely a negative. Social media users dropped 31%. That's pretty awful, right? I mean, that's about as bad as you could get. Oh, and by the way, as you mentioned, the social media or entertainment side of things, that was down 42.8%. So there's a lot of problems that they've got from that side of things, but it's not just that side of things. It's the whole company when you're looking at the monthly active users. So that's a bit of a problem. The volumes are there. They're absolutely running for the exits in a pretty fast way, John. And it's something I think they missed, even with the revenue that they did get. It was down 1.7%. That was still a miss from the expectation. So across the board, these guys are struggling. We've seen this a lot in the earnings season. We've seen a lot where they've crushed it in every single way, but we've also seen, wow, they missed this. That's a good reason why the stock's down about 15% today. I don't think you need to chase this one. They've got to prove to us that they can fill something up where that social media has become empty, and that's going to take some time.
Yep. Down to $11, folks. That's not the 52-week low. In fact, it's fairly substantially above the 52-week low, which was basically $6 or just under $6. So it's got some room to give back because of the build that people put in for how bullish they were on the stock. But perhaps a lot of that bullish sentiment has faded, Pete.
Yeah.
All right. Home Depot and Lowe's. Home Depot reports another quarter, another one, Pete, of soft earnings. They revised their fiscal 2024 outlook and are now forecasting a decline in adjusted earnings. So not just in revenue, Pete, but in actual bottom line earnings. That's a pretty tough thing. So I would think that people are going to be watching that and a little concerned. And by the way, Lowe's and Home Depot pretty much trade lockstep. Unless everybody went to one, instead of the other, and that's not usually the case. And you're a guy who should know.
I do know, because I go to Home Depot probably at least one day a week, sometimes even just to walk around, man. But I'm looking around and I'm looking at the traffic in the parking lot, the whole thing. And it's just a boots on the ground kind of a thing. But John, when you miss, your comp sales are down 3 to 4%. That's what you're projecting out there. That hurts. You look at the rest of the guidance, you look at the soft earnings that they've got. Here's the amazing part, though, and I can't quite figure this one out, because everywhere I looked, there was something negative. Everywhere I looked, transactions were down. Everywhere you look, you're looking at something that's not good. Their projections, not good. This stock right before we came on, I was looking at it. It was trading $3.50. It was up $5. I mean, it was down a little bit early. It's now up $4 or $5. It's not that far off of some of the highs, but year to date, the stock has done absolutely nothing. This is where we started the year. This is where it is right now. And they're going to have to figure out something, John, to be able to get those customers back in, to get the transactions to be a little bit better, and try to figure out different ways to do a lot of the different things that are going on within the Home Depot, because it's sluggish and it's easy to walk the aisles. I can tell you that. That's not a good sign, by the way, but that's another thing. So when I look at this thing, I wonder, is Lowe's as bad? Probably so, because I think that a lot of folks have pulled back. They pulled back on their coffee. They're definitely pulling back on some of the home improvements that they're doing, either by themselves or whatever. And I think that's a major problem. So that's something that might get a little bit better, however, as we've watched these rates come down, 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 and all of a sudden you start looking at some of the rates for the mortgage rates, and you're down about a year low, hitting those lows about a year ago. That says something. So maybe there is a little bit of hope out there.
Yeah, there's definitely hope. And, from the high to the low, Pete, or low to the high in this case, it opened 341, to Pete's point, folks. It did trade down just beneath that to 339 and change, but now it's at 353, and that's a pretty significant turnaround that happened today. So obviously somebody was ready to pounce on any kind of soft earnings and figured they'd put more money to work there. It's already traded 3.7 million shares versus 3.4 million normal. So yeah, somebody, some hedge fund or endowment, whatever, somebody big was waiting out there to buy some.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a look, Pete, at one of your favorite guys, Stephen A. Smith.
I love him.
This is not Mr. Stephen A. Smith. This is Saturday Night Live, but it might be one of the best impersonations of Stephen A. that I've ever seen, Pete.
Molly, I've thought about this question very deeply. I've been talking to my family, my friends, and my doctor.
He's always screaming.
Right. That I got Steph Curry because he's the greatest shooter of all time.
Of all time.
And Molly, I've personally seen
That
him
is
do
a
this.
perfect
Shoot the ball from
imitation.
San Francisco into the first class seat on an airplane. And stay with me. 6 hours later, the ball swishes into a basket.
6 hours later, the ball.
Right when you think Saturday Night Live might be getting bad, it's not.
Steph Curry is the worst player to ever play.
The worst player.
I made sure he scored 32 last game.
He is always
But my
kind of
man
bearish
Luka
on
got a
stuff,
40
this
piece,
guy.
And then he
The
pulled
real
down
guy.
8 biscuits and threw in some extra sauces. Okay? Your man Steph is too short.
Too short. That's awesome. I absolutely love it, John. And I am a huge lover of Stephen A. Smith's, take on the sports world, and he's always very good, in my opinion. We seem to look at things very similarly. The guy will even go in the political world once in a while, right? I mean, he goes outside of just sports. He seems to be about as well educated as anybody at ESPN. Honestly, he's pretty spectacular. I think he's one of the highest paid guys there as well. I mean, I think he's bringing in a little bit of bank, and obviously there's a little bit of competition with a few other guys there, but he has done an amazing job. That's funny. So what is, John, maybe it's the real version of that, but what's the best sports show? I just thought it would be fun for you and I to kind of kick that around. I'm going to say Inside the NBA. I've watched it many, many times. I don't watch much in the NBA. I really don't. I used to, and I used to have, season tickets. You and I used to go to the Bulls games when we were both in Chicago. Been good, a lot of Timberwolf games over the last 20 years or plus or whatever. But other than that, not a lot of following. Don't watch it on TV at all, except I'll just tune into TNT just to laugh. When you've got Shaq sitting there on one side and you've got Kenny Smith, is great kind of a middleman, right? In between he and Barkley. And then, of course, you got Ernie. So you've got the greatest group of guys. They're funny. They do a lot of great things. They know what the heck they're talking about. You appreciate their opinions on everything because they've been there, done that. And these guys are absolute freaks in terms of what they were able to accomplish, especially Shaq. But Jon, is there anything better? I mean, there have been times where I'm just sitting there by myself, nighttime, turning it on, and I'm watching that, and it's the most entertaining thing ever. And sometimes they might not even be talking about basketball, and it's still great. It's absolutely great, and it's fun. But is that one of your faves, or is it more into something at ESPN, or what would you say?
No, I would say you're right because they have so many characters there, Pete.
Yeah.
And they are characters because Shaq, fantastic. I mean, the whole group, Charles Barkley, that they make that show. And if they dropped off, the show wouldn't be there. It would fall right off a cliff. So I think Pat McAfee also has one of the best shows. I question some of his guests sometimes and some of his regulars, but I know he really puts his heart and soul into it. And when he's live on game day and things like that, Pete, it's unbelievable because, he will sing the fight song from any school and because he's just that into it. So, I'd say those are the top two with Stephen A's show, of course, being in there. So I'd say these are the top three shows. Stephen A. Smith, like you say, that NBA show, and Pat McAfee.
Yeah, McAfee's phenomenal. My favorite one so far, well, there's probably two. He had one when he was at the University of Georgia that he went absolutely bonkers out there and had everybody singing songs and everything. And then there was the one at Notre Dame last year where he brought in the fake Lou Holtz to interview Lou Holtz.
Yeah.
That was off the charts. I mean, that was phenomenal. And the coach is such a great guy at Notre Dame. I love the heck out of that guy, and he's a competitor. The guy's from Ohio State, and he's the head coach now, obviously, last year or two at Notre Dame, and he's done a great job. He's outstanding and just a nice guy, and they have real quality people. That was a great one. All right, Jon, Major League Baseball. Who's the MVP? I'm going to say there's two or three guys that I think could stand out and you could just make a great argument on any of them. But there's something about what Aaron Judge is doing this year where the guy's on pace for 60 home runs. He's already hit 42. Ohtani's only 6 behind him, so Ohtani's right there in most every category. But when you look at what Aaron Judge has been able to accomplish, I think it's pretty amazing. He's second in his performance right now, batting average, 329. That's pretty incredible because this is a home run hitter, and yet his batting average is right up there with the very best of them. He's number 2 there. He's number 1 on RBIs, makes some sense, 107 of those. He's also been walked 98 times, which is the number 1 spot. I wonder why they're walking him. Well, they don't want another home run going over the top. That's why.
That's why.
This guy's pretty special. I think you could make a case for a couple of other people, one of them even being Ohtani, but he's a designated hitter. That probably hurts him a little bit because, he's not as much out on the field because of the injury and he's not pitching this year. All of that. Still an amazing guy. Still hits the ball 500 feet. But I put it on Aaron Judge. Where do you stand on this one?
I'd say Aaron Judge, obviously, Pete. But I'll throw out a couple stats to you real quick. Yeah. This guy Witt, who plays for the Royals, so nobody ever sees him play because, even, unless you're a hardcore Royals fan, that, Pete, if the Royals came to town, that would be the ticket you'd sell. Because you're saying, well, I got 82 games. I don't need to see all 82, and I for sure don't need to see the Royals. Well, this is why you might want to keep that ticket rather than sell it. He's hitting 350 this year, Pete. His on base is 174. He's got 153 hits. Okay, so Judge has 20 doubles. This guy has 31. Judge has 1 triple. He has 10 triples, double-digit triples, Pete. Now, the difference is, of course, Judge has 39 homers. He has 19. But, if you were playing Moneyball, which one of those two guys do you really need? The
Yeah.
guy with, the higher batting average and all those doubles, triples, or do you need the guy with the homers? Now, Judge is a great player, no doubt, and I think the shoe-in for the MVP this year. But this guy, Bobby Witt, you just take a look next time the Kansas City Royals are anywhere near, or watch them on TV, and you'll say, yeah, pretty special.
Well, and the other thing I'd even mention, John, is Kansas City is, even though they're in third place right now in the Central, they're pretty damn good. They've won 65 games. And these guys have one of the best run differentials of anybody in all of Major League Baseball. They got 91. Now, there's other, the Yankees are 107, Baltimore's 93, but nonetheless, these guys are right there. So despite the fact that they are just sort of sitting in the middle and we could say that they're boring, it's Kansas City, who cares? I think Witt has raised that level to the next level. They could be a team that could possibly do pretty well, I think, if they were able to get into the postseason. Now they're not that far away because they're chasing the Twins and the Guardians, who are kind of battling each other back and forth, and they've been slowly kind of creeping up. That makes it pretty interesting. And that kid Witt, he is amazing. Some of the numbers, and you read some of them off, he's pretty special and somebody to watch, I think, in Major League Baseball. Probably doesn't get talked about enough because he's buried down there in Kansas City right now. And everybody else is talking about the Chiefs. They're not, they're not really going about the Royals right now. It's all about the Chiefs, which makes sense. They're Super Bowl champs twice, and they are going for a three-peat. So it makes a little bit of sense. But it's a great field down there, and it's pretty cool. And I think Kansas City is a team to watch.
I agree. Well, folks, I can't stress enough that you should be picking up this book. It's not an option, because if you want to up your game, if you'd like to get leverage on your investments and have the investment with limited risk rather than open-ended risk when you just own stocks, that's why we called this one It's Not an Option. And you can claim your free book by going to itsnotanoption.com. That's itsnotanoption.com. Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. See you then.